be discussing with them before bringing them forward to you folks, or at least one project. So that concludes the Kahukumana portion of my report tonight. Are there any questions about that portion of my report? Okay, hearing none, I'll just transition Roberta into the rest of my executive director's report.
Yes, please go ahead. So
first up is just some status on where we are in our discussions with MKSOA and the whole transition process. I'll let Bill report on the status of their planning at RFP because they have made significant progress on that. But my recent focus with Executive Director John DeFries and the Joint Management Committee has been on how can we accelerate the process for MKSOA to be ready to assume responsibilities in July 2028. I have recommended that one approach, which we've been talking about, but that I think it would advance things significantly, especially as their planning process gears up, is for MKSOA to think about the basic needs of a management plan that they would need to have in place to assume management of the basic core functions they will be responsible for in July 2028. In my opinion, if we think about July 2028 as not necessarily MKSOA having to have a complete plan, but at least the basics of a management plan that allow you folks to take over, that could help with facilitating a lot of the other things that need to occur during this transition. In my opinion, the basics of what would be required are actually reflected in our current plans. And that just sort of, so adoption of our current plans just makes more sense the more I think about this. Especially given that our plans are already serving as basically our core governing documents during the joint management relationship. I believe that given the broader responsibilities and authorities MKSOA has been granted through Act 255, and the approach they want to take with how they exercise those responsibilities that they've articulated in their strategic framework, that their management plan and their rules will necessarily need to be much broader in scope than our current plans are. And getting to that point will require considerably more time and effort to develop, vet, and get approved. So finding a way to be able to step into managing the plans currently in place by July 2028, that by itself requires a fair bit of work. With asset liability transfers, permit issues, HR issues that need to be worked out. But I think if we set that as our goal, that could be a realistic goal and not think about you folks having to have a complete plan in place. Now, these are just my ideas. Okay.
Oh, Greg, you cut out.
This would allow time, so the community engagement they want to conduct. Oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
We're getting a message that our internet connection is unstable on our side. Hang on. I'm not showing now. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Adopting our plans, they could add to it, delete it, make changes, and in the way of amendments when those are decided upon. So that's the approach that I'm advocating. We think about that we take during this transition period, particularly given the fact that we're coming up on we're 2 years into this process. There are some other things I want to cover in my ED report, but let me stop there and I'll just invite Bill if you want to say anything about the status of your planning RFP.
Sure, real quickly. Thanks, everybody. Can you hear me? I'm in the room, but I turned off my my Zoom link just to make sure, I don't know, there was crossover. On Friday, 5-person selection committee met and we heard 2 oral presentations from 2 offerers for the next version, the MKSOA version of a management plan for the summit as called for in Act 255. A selection has been made, and so that's moving through the process now of formal approval and notification and so forth. So that's about what I can say right now, but we did have 2 offers. A selection's been made and that process is moving along. Both offerers did acknowledge the good work that exists in current management plans that are in place, and each was clearly ready to begin to use those as a basis for moving forward because of the good work that's presented in those existing plans. So that's about what I can say regarding that process at the moment, though.
Any questions for myself or Bill? Bill, one question. Do you guys feel good about the quality of the plan proposals this time around?
Yes, absolutely. We had 2 very good offers. It was a good problem to have, but yes, we feel confident in that. So.
All right, so as I understand it, you folks hope to have someone in place at least by July 1st?
That's the current plan, yes.
Okay. So that'll help tremendously facilitate this process.
Yeah.
Sorry, could I ask one more question? So
Sure.
Bill, are the 2 submittals from entities that are familiar with Mauna Kea and the various issues over the years? Or are they new to the whole Mauna Kea situation?
The offerers are firms that are very familiar with the situation. Local firms that have a clear understanding of the significance of the Mauna, the hard work that's already gone into it, and the sensitivity surrounding the effort.
Okay, thank you. That's good to know.
Any other questions? Okay, the next item I wanted to update you folks on is, I believe I've reported on this previously, but if I haven't, I apologize, but this has to do with DLNR land division project reviews. So as reported previously, we recently learned from DLNR that, or Office of Conservation and Coastal Land specifically, that they wanted their land division section to start reviewing and signing off on our permit applications for proposed projects. This has never been required in the past, and it raised a concern on our part that this additional step, for a variety of reasons, could add months to the department's approval of our applications. This new requirement was further complicated by recent changes in management at the land division, who we meaning Nahua and I do not have prior relationships with. So Nahua and I met with the new management on May 12th, and were able to get some clarification on what they want to review and how this additional step would now work. These include projects that require a CDP, Conservation District Use Permit, in certain instances where a site plan approval is needed, and projects where there is an improvement that requires, or a change that requires a county or other state agency permit. So we currently have 3 projects we sent to them for their review, which you folks have already reviewed and recommended move on. We're still waiting to hear back on those applications. The MKOs have been advised of this additional step and possible delay in project approvals. So this is something that needs to now be incorporated into the whole review timeline. This is something we'll need to work through with Land Division in order to understand the requirements, determine what additional information or what kind of information we can provide going forward to facilitate their review and to develop our working relationship with them. So this is going to be a work that is still an effort in progress. But at least we got some clarification and some sense of some flexibility as we learn what it is they will want and need to review when we submit these proposals. I don't know, Nahua, if you wanted to add anything.
No, I think that covers it.
Any questions on that item?
Yeah, I do. So, I'm going to assume that this is across the board for the entire state and not just this program.
I believe it is. I don't know for sure, but I believe it is because when we asked why now and why this now, we were told that it's a result of some recent, I think, contested cases and litigation that the department has gone through on some other matters.
But not a rule change, administrative rule change that we're not aware of.
Yeah, we are not aware of, and as from what we can see, there's not been a rule change per se.
Wow. Okay.
Any other questions?
Andy had a question, but we can't hear him.
Oh. Can't hear you, Andy.
Let me try that. Does that work?
Okay, yeah, yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so given that history, is it clear how this will work when MK-SOA has taken responsibility?
I don't believe so. I made them aware of the issue, at least the management team aware of the issue and that we're working through it. But you know, by one reading of the Act 255, all decisions regarding Mauna Kea should be constrained to the authority. So, but I think that those are some of the issues between the authority and DLNR that still have to be worked out. Any other questions? Okay, I do have a bunch of things I want to cover next that were not initially things I was going to report on, but because of the recent federal funding announcements that came out on Friday, I feel compelled that I need to at least alert you folks to what is happening as best as I know and understand and what we are working on. So I'll take these one by one. So the first shoe to drop was last week, Friday, NSF, National Science Foundation, released an announcement that they had decided to delay holding their National Historic Preservation Act, Section 106 consultation meetings to, quote, allow time to assess how to align this effort with other agency-wide activities, end quote. The Section 106 process is required whenever federal funding is being considered for a project that may impact historic sites and cultural landscapes. As you recall, NSF conducted EIS, Environmental Impact Statement, scoping meetings on island back in August of 2022. And the Section 106 process is just one of many follow-ups, the follow-up steps to that. The community and those of us who have been identified as consulting parties, which includes the university, We've been waiting on hearing what NSF's next steps in this whole EIS Section 106 process was gonna be. So this news helped answer some of the growing angst in the community about when the consultation would happen. We now know it's deferred indefinitely. However, less known to the public and more impactful was that on Friday, NASA and NSF published their fiscal year 26 budgets being proposed by the Trump administration. NSF's proposed budget included the following statement. This has to do with the design of potential new major facility construction. Quote, given the unaffordability of continuing funding two different multi-billion-dollar telescopes, NSF will advance the Giant Magellan Telescope, or GMT, which is in Chile, into what they call the major facility final design phase. But the 30-meter telescope will not advance to the final design phase and will not receive additional commitment of funds from NSF. NSF has received assurances from the GMT project that it can complete the final design phase without further investments. Moving into the final design phase does not guarantee that a project will be approved for construction, and doing so does not obligate the agency to provide any further funding. This funding request supports the continued design of a single telescope within the U.S. Extremely Large Telescope program. So as you may recall, TMT and GMT joined up years ago and were being promoted as one program called the Extremely Large Telescope program. But their progress and their funding requirements have changed significantly. And I guess NSF is now saying that they will only fund one of them and have identified GMT as a project to go forward. Now, I was in contact with TMT officials Friday evening, and they are preparing a public statement. They reiterated their commitment to the project and specifically to Hawaii. And I know they have communicated the same to Bonnie and Doug Simons and others. They also reminded me, which we knew, but a good reminder, is that this is only the administration's proposed budget, and there are many steps between now and a final budget that has to be approved by Congress. So TMT is actively working with our congressional delegation and are sending a contingent to DC this week. The potential impacts of TMT losing their federal funding to Hawaii astronomy are yet to be fully understood. But I think it would be fair to say that those impacts would be significant. Now, even less well publicized by the media, at least to this point in time, are the impacts of the broader budget reductions contained in the NASA and NSF budgets to Hawaii astronomy. Doug prepared a summary for us over the weekend to help us understand how individual observatories may be impacted, again, we don't know, by these cuts, which would have significant impacts to our operations and our budgets, quite frankly. I'm going to share just real quickly a brief synopsis of a few bullet points of what Doug shared with us. Okay, some of this won't make sense to folks, but we will do our best to answer questions and whatnot. So first thing that he pointed out was the planetary defense program seems to have survived or has survived or remains supported through the NASA budget. That program includes IRTF, which the university operates on behalf of NASA on Mauna Kea. I've highlighted all of the Mauna Kea observatories. So IRTF seems to be okay, at least in the near future. NASA funding for Keck has been zeroed out. And according to Rich Matsuda, that amounts to about a 25% cut to Keck's budget. I talked to Rich on Friday as well. So that amounts to about a 25% cut to their budget. Andy would know better, but from what our view is, Gemini's budget is proposed to be cut by 39%. That includes, as we understand it, both Gemini North, which is Mauna Kea, and Gemini South, which is Chile. DCAST on Haleakala, that budget is also cut by 39%. So they got about half of what they were seeking, according to Doug. That impacts IFA in some different ways. The National Radio Astronomy Observatory, or NRAO, their O&M budget is proposed to be cut by 45%. Presumably that is where VLBA's budget comes from. Well, Doug just corrected me. Keck is, that's 17%, not 25%. It's about a 17% cut to their budget. So VLBA's budget presumably comes from NRAO's O&M budget. TMT was not recommended to proceed to final design review, which I just mentioned. So even though they're pressing ahead, their path to funding construction is unclear. And one of the things that Doug pointed out is that if TMT does not proceed, the implications for Subaru's budget is to be determined. As you know, Japan is a major partner in TMT. And then the federal portion of the Smithsonian budget, or SMA, was cut by 25%. And we don't know yet how that reduction maps into their operating budget. So this is what we know has been proposed. The actual impact to folks in operations on the ground here yet, I think, are still being determined. Again, I think Andy would be in a better position to talk about some of what is happening on that front. I can tell you that when I say CMS is concerned, we have multiple concerns about the impacts of these cuts if they were to hold. Clearly, if TMT is not going to go forward, we would be losing their lease rent payments, excuse me, which are a significant portion of our stewardship budget, if you will. But we also potentially are looking at these cuts affecting the observatory's ability to contribute and pay for the services on the Mauna, which is a big part of supporting our MKSS, or shared services operation. So there's still a lot to be sorted through, but this is what we know now. Doug is still analyzing the potential impacts. I'm going to stop share here. Potential impacts to various grant programs at NSF and NASA. He notes that most of IFA's approximately 40 graduate students are sponsored via NSF and NASA grants. So their futures are in question. And Doug also notes that he noted cuts to other facilities around in the US budget or in these budgets could and will probably have indirect impacts to Hawaii astronomy because of the collaborative nature of the science that occurs. So Doug is still in the process of analyzing that stuff. So in closing, I think at this time, I think it's fair to say that the combination of uncertainties about new land use agreements for the observatories, the likelihood of future decommissioning of MKO, multiple MKOs, for a variety of reasons, federal funding now being potentially one of them, which will drive up costs for any remaining facilities who want to stay on the Mauna. In combination with the anticipated cost of new leases in a time of reduced federal support, clearly leaves Hawaii astronomy under extraordinary pressure. So while each Hawaii facility is organizing their own effort to sustain their funding, we believe, and the MKOs collectively believe, that a coordinated response is also needed. I know Doug and the MKOs are working on that now with plans to hit DC in the works. So thus far, media attention has focused on TMT, but the problem actually runs much deeper. So that concludes my executive director's report for the evening, Chair. Happy to take any questions, and apologies for the sour note I leave folks with. Sour news I leave folks with.
I guess my comment is, wow. Because everything's so intertwined and interdependent. I really appreciate your quick summary of, the information you just shared, and for Doug having done the analysis that you just shared with us, because until information is very clear, it makes it difficult for you, Greg, and the university, as well as the MKOs, to figure out exactly where things stand.
Yeah, hats off to Doug for burning the midnight oil over the weekend to pull this stuff together. He had to review all of these budgets separately and pull this information together. I don't know, Andy, you have anything to add?
Not really. I think Doug was right to point out that the Gemini 39% is 39% of the US contribution, and there are other partners. It's actually 68%, not 75%, that the US contributes to Gemini. But so when you multiply those numbers together, you end up with something like a 25% cut.
Okay.
To both Germany North and South, which is better, but still a great challenge.
Yeah, this is intended to just give folks a sense of the scale of potential impacts.
Yeah. Just to mention, I mean, a bit of historical context, I suppose. When the UK withdrew from Gemini, it took 22% of the operating budget away. And we had a 4-year period to react to that. This is a larger reduction and a tiny amount of time potentially to react to it. So it's going to be very challenging.
Yep.
Whatever it is.
I'm not sure if Bonnie's on, but I'm curious about the direct impact to the university, especially the students that are involved in or attached to these grants, these sign NSF grants.
Yeah, Doug would be in a better position to talk about those students. You know, relative to impact directly to CMS, we've already begun mapping out some various scenarios of what this could mean. Taking just as assumptions, these broad cuts that are in these proposed budgets and applying them to current contributions the MKOs make to support operations. So Nahula Rodrigo and Mary Beth, our fiscal administrator, have some very preliminary, very preliminary scenarios that we're still working through. We'll be discussing those with MKSOA tomorrow at our joint management committee meeting. The good news is that I think we've got cushion to carry us for a year or so, but probably not too much after that.
Yeah, the domino effect is huge on this one.
Yeah. And when I say cushion, not really cushion, it's just being able to defer things and put money where they're needed, where it's needed. Any other questions? So that concludes my executive director's report, Chair.
Wow. Okay. Let's see. I guess the next item on the agenda is executive session.
Yeah, Chair, I would like to make a motion that we move into executive session to consult with our attorneys on matters pertaining to our duties and powers and privileges and liabilities pursuant to HRS 92.5A4 regarding our joint management role with the MKSOA as well as the board's own decision-making process going forward.
Is there a second?
I second.
Thank you, Julie. We have a motion and a second to move into executive session. All in favor, say aye or raise your hand. Aye. Unanimous. So we will now move into executive session and then resume once that's completed. Thank you.
Thanks, Greg. See you tomorrow.
If you would, just as a matter of announcement, the Kona community meeting.
Oh.
26th of January, Thursday the 26th.
January.
I mean, June, sorry.
Yeah, okay, right?
Kealakekee, 5 to 7.
Okay, I will.
Thanks. Aloha.